to Ill-Equipped History, where two best friends tell you a story from history, and we are not equipped to do so. I'm Morgan, joined by my bestest friend, Emileigh.
Hey!
We're goosing, y'all. We're just goosing today.
Our brain is still mush.
Yes.
Like last week.
Yes. And now it's even later in the evening because we record at night like smart people. Yes. Listen, it's the only time we both have off together.
Literally.
Jobs
Literally.
are hard. And we're hours apart.
So, it's so sad. I keep thinking we should move close together and get a studio.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning like a shed in my backyard.
Yeah. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Cool.
As long as there's electricity and like a fan and maybe a little mini fridge. That's all we need.
Doesn't need to be perfect. We'll put up blankets on the wall to dampen the sound. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Oh, speaking of things that I want to put in my backyard, I met a miniature Highland cow. I took a picture with it.
Oh,
a cow, and it had the little fur on its face.
Little hair. Oh,
I was like, oh my god, let me pet the cow, and I hugged it.
Oh,
my jealous. Mom's work had a petting zoo, and it was the dopest petting zoo I've ever seen. They had like a pony and a goat, and a Highland cow and a llama and a sheep. That was just the fluffiest thing ever.
Oh.
And a big fat bunny. And I think there was something else. I don't remember. But they instead of having them in cages, they had them staked out and they were on leashes.
Okay.
So they still had some room and they were eating all of Mom's nice, pretty, perfect grass, which was funny. But you could just walk up and pet them.
Oh, a Highland coo. That's so cute.
It was cute.
When I was sorry.
Oh, I was going to say I'll just send you a picture of it.
Yes,
it was super cute.
Please show me. When I went to Scotland, I unfortunately never got to meet a Highland coo, but everywhere I went, I saw depictions of them and magnets and stuffed animals, and I just they don't say cow up there. They say coo. So it was just Highland coo.
Highland coo.
Everywhere. So
we should get one. I want one.
Yes.
It's so tiny.
Oh, cute.
I just sent you a picture, by the way.
Oh, let me see this shit.
If you heard me giggling, it's because I found the picture of myself again from our text messages.
Oh, look at this baby. Oh, look at this fuzzy ears.
I know. I almost posted on our socials sorry, the podcast is canceled. I'm running away to be with the Highland Goose.
Well, you should, because you look gorgeous in this picture. So.
Oh my god, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I can't, I'm just zooming in on the fuzzy ears. I can't.
I know.
Oh my God.
I just wanted the cow reminded me of my mother-in-law's dog, Lily. She has the fur that grows on the top of her head
like
that.
It's like a mop of hair.
Yeah, I sent that to my mother-in-law. Shout out Nancy. And she was like, take it home right now. Take the cow home.
Steal the cow.
Steal the cow.
Put it in your trunk.
I didn't drive the truck today. My bad. I drove my car like a sensible human.
Oh. Well, thank you for sharing that. That made my
You're
entire
welcome.
day so much better.
You're welcome.
The coo. Okay. So we're not talking about Highland coos today. We're talking about another topic.
Still a good topic.
Thank you. I was super excited to cover it. So let's get into our skit.
Honestly, I don't know how we haven't done this one sooner.
Me neither. It popped into my brain and I was like, all right, this is what we're covering today.
Yeah, it feels so in your face, duh.
Right?
Why haven't we done this before?
Well, today's the day.
Today's the day. Okay.
November 24th, 1805. A sodden exploration party is encamped in the Pacific Northwest, where the Columbia River empties into the Pacific Ocean. It's taken the team over a year to get here, but now they're trapped, isolated from anyone who can help them. Their captains call them around as they decide on what to do.
All right, men. This isn't looking good. We're running out of options. We have finally made it to the Pacific Ocean, but winter is fast approaching. Here are our options. 1, we stay here and hope for a ship. 2, we go north, back towards the villages, where they charge way too much for food. 3, we go south, build a fort and eke out a living hunting elk. 4, we go back to the Nez Perce tribe, where it's at least dry. You men are like family to myself and Lewis. We've gotten us here, but you loyal men need to decide how we move forward. These are your lives at stake. We're going to have a vote. White House, how say you?
I vote we go to the south and hunker down. It's worked for us before.
Noted. Gas? I vote we go back to Nez Perce. They have supplies they'll trade for. Noted. Warner?
I vote we stay here. Who knows when a ship will come by?
Collins?
Clarke asks each man in the 33-member crew their vote, and it is recorded. Finally, he gets to a man who does not expect his name to be called.
York? Yes? How do you vote? Wait, you're asking me? Of course. You've been by my side throughout this entire journey. Your life is just as much at stake. What do you think we should do? I think we should go south. Wait out the winter. Thank you. Noted. Sacagawea, what do you think?
Sacagawea turns, startled that her name is called. You're asking me?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be here if not for you. You've lived in this area. Tell me, what do you think is our best course of action?
Sacagawea thinks for a moment, then responds. We build a fort in the south. We'll survive the cold there.
Then it's settled. Majority vote rules we go south. Build an encampment and set out when the weather warms up. Let's go, men!
Wonderful acting, by the way, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today, we are finally, for some reason, covering the Lewis and Clarke expedition!
Let's go on adventure! Expedition!
Expedition unknown.
Ooh. This one is known, though.
Now it is, but it was not at the time.
So, no.
Yeah, we were... Like, neither of us know, like, why it's taken us so long for us to cover the most iconic American journey there is out there.
Seriously, like, I saw Clarke and Lewis, and I was like, why? Why haven't we done this? We've talked about a baseball player who chased fire trucks before.
And taught geese how to jump rope.
And punched a lion. All before we talked about fucking Lewis and Clarke.
It's all important history.
It's fine. Yes, this is good. It's coming when it should.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I wanted, we've been covering a lot of people lately, and I was like, what is a good, just like, event that happened in history? The most famous expedition in the United States. So here we are.
Yep.
Lewis and Clarke, also called the Corps of Discovery, is what they were called / named themselves. I did want to get this out there, so I found a 2-part documentary series by PBS that aired in like 1997 about this expedition. Most of my information comes from this documentary. I honestly follow with like its narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the documentary, and most of its sources came from the journals from the expedition. Very, very good notes and accounts of the expedition were kept by multiple members of the expedition. So we know a lot about what happened. And it goes pretty chronologically, and I just thought it made sense to follow the structure of the documentary. So just to get it out there, not everything comes from this documentary, but I'd say like 98% comes from it. It's called Lewis and Clarke, The Journey of the Corps of Discovery. Again, it was published by PBS in 1997. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed watching it. I got almost 15 pages of notes just from this one documentary. So, yeah. It was very informative. I won't go into every minute detail, but I will be covering the majority of the events that happened. So let's get started. Before we get into the journey, we have to talk about why the journey happened in the first place. So in 1801, Thomas Jefferson is the third president of the United States. And he has his eyes set west. He's like, okay, because at this time in the United States really just extends up to the Mississippi River from the East Coast. Everything past that is French territory, Spanish territory, unexplored, unclaimed territory. So it's very unknown to Americans. There's people out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's native tribes all over the western U.S. Again, like fur trappers from Canada. Mexico extends all the way up into California. So, there's people out there, but not...
Right.
It's not tracked by Americans. So Thomas Jefferson's like, I want to get Americans out there. Let's explore this land. And his big goal was to try to find a waterway that was rumored to be called the Northwest Passage that extended from the East Coast to the West Coast of this land mass of the continent, to have a waterway from Europe to Asia.
Okay.
And his idea was that if they could find a river or some kind of waterway that extended through the country, like boom, 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 money, 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 like the country would be lousy with trade and exports and, because right now, for all they know, there's two giant continents between Europe and Asia going through the Atlantic Ocean, and then Asia is a world away from Europe on the other way, and there's an entire continent between the two as for Asia,
Oh.
So in Africa, and they're still having to go around the Horn of Africa to trade via ship. So he's like, okay, we're hearing rumors of this, and they're not the only ones looking for this Northwest Passage. Like France is looking for it. Britain is looking for it. Spain is looking for it. So everyone's frantically trying to find this Northwest Passage. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to hire an expedition to explore the West. And I'm going to assign my very trustworthy secretary, Meriwether Lewis, because he knows his stuff. So Meriwether Lewis, like I said, was Thomas Jefferson's secretary. His personal secretary. Meriwether Lewis was born August 18th, 1774. The Lewises and the Jeffersons were actually neighbors in Virginia. So the families had known each other for a long time. And Lewis had fought under George Washington in the Whiskey Rebellion. Oh. So he'd been in the army. He was an officer in the army. In this time, I guess 1801, maybe, he was 28 years old at the time. So he was still pretty young.
So young.
Yeah. And Jefferson was like, hey, I really trust you. You're one of my closest confidants. You know your shit. Will you lead this expedition to the West? And Lewis was like, hell yeah. But I'm not doing it alone. I'm going to call my buddy, William Clarke.
Okay.
So William Clarke, he was 4 years older than Meriwether Lewis. He was born August 1st, 1770. So their birthdays are only a couple weeks apart.
Oh.
He's from Kentucky. His family moved there when he was 14. And at this time, when he was 14, Kentucky was wilderness. Like, there are not very many people out there. So he grew up on the frontier, basically. He knew how to survive in the wilderness. He knew how to navigate all that. And Clarke also served in the army. He served during the Indian Wars in the Northwest Territory. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out where the Northwest Territory was. I didn't know if that meant Ohio or like Michigan or like Minnesota, you know, like somewhere in the Northwest, not all the way to like Oregon or anything, but I want to say it's more like Ohio. And one thing to note about them personality wise, Meriwether Lewis, he was extremely intelligent, but he had some mental health struggles.
Okay.
In multiple sources, it's written that he really struggled with what I presume is depression.
Okay.
His whole family struggled with it. Jefferson kept describing him as having a melancholy disposition, and there would be weeks at a time that he could barely function, which sounds like depressive episodes.
Yes.
And then he would like kind of get out of it and he'd be fine and he'd get back into a depression, which is that's a pretty normal pattern for like a depressive disorder.
Yeah.
But again, absolutely brilliant. And then William Clarke, he was super outgoing, friendly, chill. Like, he was literally described as laid back. Nice. A very good foil to Lewis. And the thing is, they worked really, really well together, thankfully. And a bonus about Clarke is that with his work in the Indian Wars that had occurred, he knew how to negotiate with the native peoples. Mm-hmm. He could become very friendly with them. He had some friends who were native. And the whole purpose of this journey, they were not going to like conquer. Right. Jefferson was very clear, like, this was a peaceful expedition. They were not going to attack native tribes. They were going to try to be friendly with as many of them as possible. Mm-hmm. So leading up to them actually leaving, Jefferson requested Lewis to go to the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, where he was going to get a bunch of training in, quote, botany, zoology, mineralogy, and celestial navigation. End quote. And that's a quote from the documentary. So he was like, you're going to learn all these different things that you're going to need to know in the wilderness. Like, you're not going to just be able to call home and be like, hey, we're lost. Let me look it up on my phone and see where we are. Like, they were going to be on their own. So this is all, and they didn't know anything really about the West. So they wanted the expedition to collect samples and identify new plants and animals that they were going to encounter. Because the plan was for the American people to eventually, hopefully, start moving west. Yeah. And Jefferson, who was a scientist at heart, he was like, I want to learn about this new country, but also so we can be prepared for what to expect.
Right.
Because the United States and North America in general has so many different climates. Like, there's not one region that's like another region in the country.
No.
So
there's not.
Absolutely understand that. So Lewis started stockpiling on supplies like rifles. Apparently, he had been able to collect the most advanced rifles of the time.
Okay.
Tents, clothing, gifts to trade with the Native American tribes they were going to encounter. Quote, barrels of whiskey. Barrels. They had a lot of whiskey.
We're taking barrels of whiskey on a expedition?
Yep.
Okay.
Priorities, right?
Yeah.
And he bought a Newfoundland dog that I've seen was named either Seaman or Scannon. But he had a dog.
Or Scannon?
Yeah. I've seen both.
Cute.
Yeah. And while he was preparing for his journey, Lewis studied medicine under Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was a very popular physician at the time. His treatment of choice was very powerful laxatives. He went on and on about the healing power of purging the body. So
you just gotta shit it out.
Yeah.
Broken leg.
Don't you feel
Shit
better
about it.
after taking a shit?
Headache.
You laugh, but when I was growing up, that's whenever we came to my mom with an ailment. Like, our blank hurt. She'd go, well, did you poop?
I'm guilty of saying that to my kids.
Sometimes it's all you need.
Hey, did you poop, buddy? Like, I don't.
We'll try that first, and if that didn't work, we'll revisit this.
Yeah.
And usually it's fine.
Yeah. Well, half the time they're stinking up the house, so yeah, that is the problem. Go poop.
So, Lewis bought 600 doses of what were called Rush's Thunderbolts.
No. Please tell me this isn't a laxative.
It is a laxative. And one of the historians said that the name was an apt descriptor of what happened
They
when you
called
took
it
this.
Rush's Thunderbolts? You taking your shitting through a screen door in 30 seconds.
Yep. That's pretty apt.
What the fuck was in that?
I have no idea.
I don't want to know. I'm scared.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not good. So we're jumping forward to 1804, July 4th. Okay. Napoleon Bonaparte offered to sell France's western territory in what would eventually be the Louisiana Purchase, which we talked about in our New Orleans bonus episode. Mm-hmm. Basically, Jefferson got the land deal of the
century
of all time.
Yeah.
Basically bought 1/3 of what is currently the United States for pennies on the acre.
For literally what he had in his left pocket at the time.
It was like 14 cents an acre. The deal was several $1 million, but 14 cents an acre. Jefferson didn't hesitate for a second.
Take my money.
Give me
Stephen Fry.
Yes.
Take my money.
He wanted the land. He was like, I want this land. I want to expand the United States. Yeah. Let's do this. Great deal.
He saw that we were a growing country that needed that territory, that land.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So he bought the mission was going to happen regardless, but now that Jefferson had acquired all this land in the Louisiana Purchase, now we have even more incentive. Now this is our land that you can start discovering.
Yeah.
So he dubbed the group the Corps of Discovery. The mission was going to start in 1804 with about, I've seen between 41 and 47 men.
Okay.
I saw a whole JSTOR article that was like, we don't know exactly how many people. We expect 45 is the most definitive number, but I've seen.
That's a good estimate.
Yes, and their plan was to take the Missouri River to the West Coast, and Missouri River, hop into the Columbia River to the Pacific Ocean, because they knew the Missouri River went west. They knew the Columbia River fed into the Pacific, so to find where that meets, and then we'll find that Northwest Passage, that waterway through the western U.S. We'll have direct routes up the Mississippi and all the other rivers in the eastern U.S. We'll have direct water lines through to Asia.
Okay.
The expedition was supposed to be between 18 to 24 months. That's about how long they expected it to be. And Thomas Jefferson allocated $2,500 to the journey in 1804. Which was a lot of money.
$2,500? Did you do the math for that?
I didn't. I meant to.
Okay, 1804, $2,500 worth today. It has the purchasing power of about $68,656.
I feel like that's not that much.
It's really not that much, but I think if you take into account, they were living off the land.
Yeah, they were.
So I don't think they maybe needed as much.
Mm-hmm. No, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
So, fall of 1803, William and Clarke made their way to St. Louis, which was, I think, the westernmost point of the United States, and it's right on the Mississippi River. They wintered there, finalized all their plans, got their boats ready, got their supplies ready, got their crew ready. And they were going to be...
Sorry, I'm just saying, it is crazy to think that St. Louis was the most western point of the United States at that point.
I know, right?
What the fuck?
I know. And if you scroll down, I have some pictures. I have Lewis and Clarke here.
Yeah.
There's not very many pictures. So if you scroll down to the last picture I have a map of their expedition.
Okay.
Starting in St. Louis.
Okay.
So red is their forward journey, purple is their return journey. It gets a little messy up here. I'll explain that.
Yeah.
So
it is a little messy, yes.
Yes. There was a reason why, but we'll get to it when we get there. So they're getting ready, they're preparing, and they were going to be the first Americans to travel as far as they did. No American had ever gone as far west as they did. And honestly, they were, besides like the Native American tribes that like lived in the area, they were the first people to make it out as far as they did and travel as far as they did. Like this was in the documentary, the historians and the writers and authors kept comparing this expedition to the moon landing. It was that It was that equivalent of an undertaking. And even one of the historians said that you can see the moon. You know what it looks like. You see it there. They had no idea what to expect on this journey. They had no clue. They were truly going into the unknown.
They were going in blind.
Really, yeah. They had a map up to, if you see here, I'll get to it, but Fort Mandan.
Okay.
In the map. They had a map, a rough map up to this point. Because, again, like most of this was French and British territory. And there were trappers and stuff. Past Fort Mandan, blind. Completely no clue.
That's half the journey.
Yeah. The crew, again, like we don't know exactly how many. I wrote down a list of all the names. I'm not going to go through because it's like over 40. But we have captains Lewis and Clarke. I'll just point out a couple notable names. Charles Floyd, Reuben and Joseph Fields, Joseph Whitehouse, Patrick Gass, John Ordway, George Drouillard, Pierre Cruzat. That's just a few. Okay. And in the documentary, journals from Gass, Whitehouse, and Ordway were very frequently referenced. They kept really, really good journals of the trip, as well as Lewis and Clarke.
Okay.
And they're like other people kept journals, but they had the most definitive accounts of the day-to-day, what happened, all that.
Yeah, maybe they weren't as detailed.
Right. And these journals were very detailed.
Yeah.
All right, so they're on their way.
They're off.
Oh, and I wanted to point out before they leave, sorry.
Yes.
The documentary pointed out that, again, not much is known about them. Almost all of them were young, healthy, single men. Most of them were like in their 20s, like pretty young.
Okay.
And they were personally selected to be like very fit and healthy so they could survive the wilderness.
Right.
So included in the group, there were some men who were half Native American and half white.
Okay.
I think, who was it? Pierre Cruzat, he was a French Creole who could speak some different languages. Francois Labiche could speak several Native American languages, and he was French. George Drouillard, he was half Shawnee and half French. Okay. So a pretty diverse crowd. And additionally, Clarke brought an enslaved man in his quote-unquote possession named York.
Okay.
And Lewis brought his dog. Yep. And now they're off. They cross the Mississippi. They start sailing up the Missouri River. And kind of on, like, initially they started getting not, like, crazy trouble, but they're rowing against the current of the Missouri.
Yeah.
And it's taking a long time, and they're like running into logs. Their mast gets snapped by like overhanging trees. It's a little rough. Sometimes the men had to literally get out of the boat and pull the keel boat up. And they had a keel boat, which had most of the supplies. It's a bigger boat. And then they had a couple like canoes.
Okay.
With like some other men. I think like just a few. And for like, besides like the difficulties of the boat, for the first while of their journey, things were fine. They're going through, you know, they are at the river. They're hunting pretty well. George Drouillard would hunt for fresh meat every morning. Silas Goodrich was the best fisherman, and he would fish. John Ordway would hand out their rations for the day, which included cornmeal, flour, salt pork, and 4 ounces of whiskey every morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. And I assume those are like the daily rations.
Yeah.
But yeah, like things were good. They were making way. I think the documentary said about 14 miles a day, which against current and without a motor is not too bad.
That's, I don't think just walking I could do 14 miles a day.
Yeah, it was a lot. Clarke spent most of his time on the keelboat making maps of their journey.
Yeah.
And Lewis, whenever they stopped, he would collect plants and soil samples. He would provide medical attention to the men, including the laxatives. That was mostly like he would either bleed them out or give them laxatives. That was their medical treatment.
How did they survive?
Yeah.
They're either
they managed to
shitting their brains out or they're being bled to death. You got ghosts in your blood. You got to bleed it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So this next section I titled Onward.
Onward.
For the first few months of their journey, it was unbearably hot. Because they left, I thought I wrote down, they left in, I believe, May of 1804. Okay. Yeah, May of 1804. They left. They're traveling in like peak summer.
Yeah.
It is hot.
Yeah.
And the mosquitoes are absolutely murder.
Yeah.
It was so bad the dog howled like all throughout the night because they were just being eaten alive by mosquitoes. All of them. It was really bad.
Poor dog.
I know. And the gnats, like it was just so bad. There's journal entries of them talking about like they're really bad. They're really bad. They're really significantly bad. They're god awful bad. Like every description in the journal is just worse and worse and worse. And like I said earlier, Jefferson wanted them to have as detailed of notes as possible. He wanted as complete of a picture as possible about everything and anything they encountered. Yeah. So again, like Lewis was taking like specimens of plants and soil. Clarke had his journal and was mapping, and then other crewmen had journals that they were recording the day-to-day activities. But then they also mentioned that Lewis sometimes went days without writing in his journal. And it's suspected that's when he was going through like a depressive period. The historians say that Lewis's depression never interfered with the mission.
Okay.
They kept going. They never stopped. He never let anyone know anything was wrong. And really the only sign that they had to indicate possible depressive mood was that he would not write in his journal.
But then when he would write, it would be very detailed, very... Right. Okay.
Illustrations of things, all that.
Yeah.
And as they're making their way up the Missouri, Lewis and Clarke had to conduct 5 court-martials. Because again, this is like a military expedition, technically. Like they're captains. Everyone else is considered a private. And these are all young men out on their own. So some offenses included falling asleep during guard duty, stealing whiskey, getting drunk, insubordination. There was one case of mutiny. Oh, God. The punishment was lashes.
Oh.
But there was one one guy got like 50 or 100 lashes for one. Like, I don't remember which one it was. And then, like, after that, no one did anything else. They're like, all right, we're done. No more shenanigans.
That's so many. That could kill somebody.
I know. It was like 100 lashes on a bare back. Like, it was a very tough punishment.
That was probably mutiny, honestly.
I think it was falling asleep on guard duty. I think that was that punishment.
Oh my God.
I think that was the most severely punished. Which, I mean, I can I don't understand the severity of the punishment, but I do understand like why it was taken so seriously, because they're in completely unknown territory. Yeah. You're on guard duty. You don't know if there's going to be like a wolves or bears or a Native American tribe that comes and attacks you in the middle of the night. Like, yeah. I do understand that. Yeah. But yeah, the shenanigans stopped after that. In the late summer of 1804, a lot of the men were starting to get really sick, and especially Sergeant Charles Floyd. He, over a few days, he started getting sicker and sicker. Nothing was working, and he did eventually pass away. Lewis diagnosed him with bilious colic because he was like throwing up a lot, coughing a lot. Modern historians think that he had appendicitis. Oh. So there's not
anything you can do about
even
that.
If he was in a city, like, it's very unlikely he could have received, like, they think he had a burst appendix. So it's honestly, like, even in modern
time,
society,
if you don't catch it in time, you're dead. Yeah.
So, and this was around modern day Sioux City, Iowa, is where he was buried. Okay. So the first unfortunate casualty, death on this journey. Okay. The next stop of the journey was the Great Plains, which is one of the largest grasslands on Earth. And it's just page after page after page of just marveling at the vast expanseness of the Great Plains. Because these guys are all from the eastern U.S. Like, there's trees everywhere. It is just forest. Yeah. Up until the Mississippi. And, like, maybe they've seen the coast, they've seen the Atlantic Ocean, but they've never been in the middle of a continent with not a tree in sight, not a hill in sight.
I can understand that. I get uncomfortable when there are no mountains around me, when there are no trees around me. I'm like, I don't feel right. Like, I love Florida. I love visiting Florida. It's too flat. There's not enough going on. Like, I can understand just being awestruck by the Great Plains. I totally
I agree. I also am a mountain girly. I need my mountains. But yeah, and they're just like, it is absolutely beautiful out here. That was something that was really nice, is throughout their journey, they really marveled at the beauty of nature.
I love that.
I do too. I really love that. And they discovered coyotes, antelope, buffalo, and prairie dogs. They were like obsessed with prairie dogs. They actually caught one.
Oh my God.
And they were able to send it back to Jefferson eventually.
Alive?
Yes.
Just a live-ass prairie dog.
Yeah. And on their journey, they made contact with numerous Native American tribes. And relations were pretty friendly. They came prepared with all kinds of gifts for these tribes as they passed through. They had peace medals, which I think had Jefferson's face on them or something, but they just handed them out as tokens of friendship. Okay. They told the tribes they were now a part of the U.S. Like, by the way, Jefferson just bought all this land in the Louisiana Purchase, and now you're in the United States.
Which is interesting, because it's like, whose was it to buy first anyway?
Right. Like, who...
It was we're not going to get into it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Okay. And they called Jefferson their great father. Like, the Lewis and Clarke expedition told the tribes that Jefferson was now their great father. Because he's president, I guess.
I mean, how are you going to explain, like, what the president seat is and, like, all that to someone where you don't speak their language?
Doesn't have that. Or a society that doesn't even have that structure in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a fine way to describe, to try to, yeah.
And Lewis and Clarke had a lot of promises that the native peoples would prosper and rule over their lands. Like, that was the intention at the time, was that like, hey, we'll leave y'all alone. You're a part of this country, but we want you guys to continue to prosper and we'll be best buddies.
God,
one thing though is that they kept referring to in like their speeches, they recorded their speeches that they made. They kept referring to the native peoples as children, which I think is very infantilizing of like established societies. Like, children, you are now part of this great nation, and children, you have now a great father. It's like, it's a little infantilizing.
I don't really like that.
Literally grown-ass people. But, you know,
there's probably white like an 80-year-old dude white sitting people. There like,
my child!
Bruh, I'm like 85.
Yeah. So, things are good until they encounter the Teton Sioux.
Okay.
Also known as the Lakota.
Okay.
Tribe. So on their way, they camped with the Yankton Sioux. And the Yankton Sioux, they were very friendly. We gave them gifts and stuff. Things were great. We're like, hey, you're about to go into Teton Sioux territory. And you need to be careful because they're very powerful and they will rob you.
Oh.
So, you know, just be aware. And they're like, okay, thanks for the heads up. They continue on their way. On September 30th, the Corps of Discovery encounters 3 chiefs of the Lakota tribe: Black Buffalo, Buffalo Medicine, and the Partisan, which is terrifying to me.
Partisan.
The Partisan. And 30 warriors along the banks of the Missouri River. So they're like, hey, guys, we have gifts for you. Let's go. And they're like, we want more. And they were trying to exploit them into giving more than they could afford. Like, they're like, we still have to get across this entire damn country. Like, we can't give you everything that we have.
Yeah.
And things were starting to turn aggressive. Things were getting a little scary. So Clarke, at one point, Clarke and the Partisan were like arguing with each other by the boats. And some of the Lakota started grabbing the tow ropes of the boats to like take them. While I think Lewis is on board the keel boat.
They're trying to steal Lewis.
I know, Lewis. So Clarke therefore pulled out his sword, and then more warriors notched their arrows to their bows. So things were very tense. So Clarke was like, we have to continue on our journey. And the Partisan was like, no, you won't. If you try, I will kill you. So things were very tense until Black Buffalo intervened and was able to neutralize the tensions. He was like, hey, if the women and children of our tribe can come check out your boats, we'll let y'all leave. And they're like, okay.
That's such a weird direction to go.
I know. I mean, it worked. So, I don't know. And they ended up staying there for another 3 days. And the entire time, the situation, no one liked this. Like, everyone was like, ugh. But eventually they were able to leave the Lakota without incident and entered what is now North Dakota in about October.
Okay.
And Clarke estimated they had traveled about 1,600 miles at this point.
Wow.
Between May and October. It's crazy, right? About 6 months into their journey, they were reaching the last area on their map. Like I said, everything past this point was completely unknown, and they wanted to have a safe place to wait out the winter. Mm-hmm. So they traveled to the Mandan village, which it's on the Missouri River. It's home to the Mandan tribe and the Hidatsis tribe. Mm-hmm. About 4,500 people lived in this area, which was more than the population of the people who lived in Washington, D.C. Like, this was a city.
Wow.
A huge population of people. This was also a major trading center for Europeans in the area and other Native American tribes. And as they were coming in, the Mandans were like, welcome to our home. You are welcome. And they let them build a fort across the river. Fort Mandan. So they were like, okay, like, we're going to wait out the winter here. Like, we're in the Midwest. The Midwest gets, like, crazy cold.
Yes.
They recorded temperatures as low as 45 below zero. It was cold.
They're Shackleton-ing it right now. That is too cold.
But on the plus side, like, they had an entire community that, like, knew how to survive this. And the Mandans would come and trade with them. One of the crew had a fiddle. And, like, there was one story of how the Mandans would come over and he would play his fiddle, and then the Americans would dance for the Mandans, and then the Mandans would dance for the Americans, and it was just a very friendly, fun time. And what I thought this was interesting is that the Mandans were extremely fascinated by and greatly respected York.
Oh,
like
that's cool.
The historians were talking about accounts where they would try to rub dirt on his skin to try to like clean it, I guess.
Oh.
But, like, he has dark skin.
Yeah.
So and they were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this man must be a person of great power.
Right.
So they're like, this guy's cool as shit.
He was cool. And he was
like,
shit.
There's like a painting I saw where he's like hands on his fist and he's like smiling as they're like marveling over his body.
He's like, you know what? I am the shit.
Yeah. Which was really interesting. And in January of 1805, the Mandans invited the expedition to participate in a sacred ceremony meant to call the buffalo back to the area because food stores were starting to run out.
Yeah.
And it worked because 2 days later, buffalo came back to the area and they like hunted the shit out of those buffalo. So they had food and they had skins for warmth and stuff. So yeah. And then while they were camped out here, Lewis did his medical treatments and stuff, and he did his best.
If we want to call it that.
He is not a doctor. Let's establish this. He was not a doctor, but he did do his best.
I don't think the doctor that taught him was a doctor.
Yeah, I'm very much, like, he was super, super popular, but I'm very much questioning his medical credentials.
Yeah.
But at one point, Lewis had to amputate a boy's toes because they were frostbitten without any anesthetic or surgical equipment. Yeah.
Oh.
Not good.
Oh, no.
And some of the crew had contracted venereal diseases while camped out at Fort Mandan, which were treated with mercury.
That's not gonna help.
Like, Lewis would literally, like, smear mercury all over their private areas.
Oh, they're gonna get Mad Hatter's disease.
And in February of 2025, 1805,
next year, the future.
In the future, in 1805, he was asked to come to the home of a young Shoshone woman who was having difficulty delivering her baby. This is where they meet Sacagawea.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So we grew up hearing the name Sacagawea.
Yeah.
The historians in the documentary said there's multiple ways to pronounce her name. No one knows for sure, but the historians kept saying Sacagawea. So that's how I'm going to pronounce the name. Because that's what actual equipped people said.
Yes.
So at this time, she was about 16 years old. She was one of the wives of Toussaint Charbonneau, who was a French-Canadian fur trader.
Okay.
About 5 years prior, or 4 to 5 years prior, she had been captured by the Hidatsas when she was about 12 and was sold to Charbonneau.
Ew.
Yeah. But her home tribe of the Shoshone Native Americans lived near the source of the Missouri River. Mm-hmm. And the Corps of Discovery were like, hey, she knows that area. Like, she could help us, like, get to the head of the Missouri and help us navigate to find the Columbia River. Like, she could be super useful and like interpret for us, like when we get there. And her husband was actually, Charbonneau was actually an interpreter too. But it was, I'll get into it later, but the way that they had to translate things were a little complicated because Charbonneau spoke French and Hidatsa. And that was it. He didn't speak English.
Oh.
But they had a few French men on their team. So Lewis and Clarke hired Charbonneau knowing that Sacagawea would come with him. And they're like, okay, like, we've got a package deal here.
Yeah.
So that was their plan. Meanwhile, Spain had learned about this expedition across North America.
Right.
And they're like, fuck, the United States is planning to invade Mexico and other Spanish territory.
Yeah.
So, because again, like, Mexico extended all the way up to like California to the Rocky Mountains. Like, it was huge.
Yeah.
Almost up to Oregon. Like, massive, massive territory. So Spain sent a platoon of soldiers and Comanche warriors to catch the expedition. Who was on, like, no one knew. Not even Jefferson knew this was going on.
Yeah.
But they missed the Corps by about a month. They were a month too late. So they came back and were like, okay, we'll try again when they come back. Because we don't know where they are. No, it's not like they have GPS.
They didn't even know.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And also meanwhile, so it's starting to get into the warmer months of 1805. Remember the Lakota? They didn't leave on the best of terms, and there was news of an impending Lakota attack making its way towards Fort Mandan.
Okay.
But Lewis and Clarke were already planning on continuing on their way. They asked the Mandan chief what to expect. Like, okay, what are some things that we can keep a lookout for to make sure we're on the right path? And the Mandan chief said that there is going to be a waterfall and mountains.
Okay.
So like, oh, okay, cool. So the waterfall will probably take us a couple hours to get around. And then the mountains will probably take a couple days.
Oh, no.
Because they're used to the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, no.
In the east. Those are the only mountains they'd ever seen in their entire life.
Oh, no.
Dun, dun, dun.
The Rockies.
Yeah, they had no clue that they were about to come across the Rocky Mountains. So they were like, oh, this will be easy. We'll make it to the Pacific Ocean and back in like less than 6 months. Like, easy peasy. And honestly, like, most of the journey to this point has been relatively easy. Like, they did lose someone to appendicitis, but like, it was fine. They had plenty of food, plenty of whiskey, like, they were good. So they're in April of 1805, they're getting ready to leave. 12 men were sent back with all the specimens they had collected up to this point, journals, samples, maps, and a letter on behalf of the remaining men who were about to venture into unknown territory.
Okay.
It was like the remaining crew sends our love to our families, and we hope you wish us well in our... Because there wasn't like back and forth communication between the expedition and Jefferson.
They've had a year of radio silence from this crew.
Yeah. So this is going to be the first contact made to the United States from the expedition with this return trip. So they left in a few canoes and dugouts, which I think are just like smaller canoes. There's 33 members total, including Sacagawea, who had her infant son with her.
Oh, jeez.
Because remember, she just had a baby. His name was Jean-Baptiste. And the crew called him Little Pomp.
Little Pomp?
Little Pomp.
Pomp.
Like pomp and circumstance.
Cute.
I know. You know what? Like, she just integrated right with the crew. While like the rest of the crew was like hunting or collecting specimens or doing whatever, she was foraging for food. And she honestly provided a comforting presence to the crew. They're like, well, now we have a woman with us. Like, she knows what she's doing. They needed a female presence. And by all accounts, nothing happened to her.
Yeah, like, they have to act like gentlemen because there's a lady around.
Yes. Right. Yes. And a baby. Yes. And it was just like she fit in really well with them.
Good.
Even though they couldn't really communicate because she only spoke Mandan and maybe Hidatsa. It was just it was a good presence. So one day, apparently, this was mentioned in the documentary, Charbonneau lost control of his canoe and almost lost like supplies and journals and scientific instruments. But Sacagawea was like super chill, and she was able to save like everything, including Lewis and Clark's journals.
Wow.
I know. I got this quote from the documentary, and it's from Lewis in his journal.
Yeah.
Quote, Charbonneau was a man of no particular merit, but Sacagawea was as brave as anyone on the expedition.
It's like, we literally could leave the husband, but can we have her? We love her. Right.
She was great.
Can he fuck off? He's literally a nuisance.
Yeah. So now, like, they're going through, let me see the map. They're past Fort Mandan, and it's very lush here, lots of little tributaries, and Lewis and Clarke are, like, naming landmarks and creeks and rivers. And they're like, every crew member got a creek named after them. And then they started moving on to like people they knew. They're like, oh, this is this creek and this creek and this creek and this river and this river. Because it's just branching all over. And as they're entering Montana, they start seeing enormous bear tracks. And the Hidatsas had warned them of an enormous bear that they needed to keep keep a lookout for. These were grizzly bears.
They're not the little black bears that we have.
No.
Grizzly bears do be grizzly. They
be grizzly.
They be grizzling.
So Lewis and another crew member shot and killed a grizzly. And we're like, oh, this is easy. Psh, no worries. After about their third encounter with the grizzly bear, they're like, this is less fun. Because it took about 8 to 12 shots to take down a grizzly bear. Like, they were shooting them in the head and the lungs, and like they were still going.
They're emu bears. Level bulletproof. These grizzly bears. They go down hard.
They
honestly
do. It takes a lot.
Same amount of bullets for emu and grizzly bear. I don't know why that's knowledge I have now. But okay.
But now we have
it.
If you see an emu and a grizzly, just go ahead and just lay down.
Honestly.
Like, you're gonna die.
You're gone.
Sorry. Yeah. Moving on into May of 1805, they started noticing the air is starting to get a little drier.
Yeah.
Like, no humidity left in the air. And they're starting to get more of a desert climate.
Okay.
Which, again, they've never encountered before. There's no desert in the eastern United States.
Yeah.
And they started seeing mountains for the first time. Like, way in the distance. They're like, oh, there's mountains. And they traveled for days and days and days. And they're like, these mountains are not getting closer. Oh, my God, what's happening? Because the Rockies are very big.
They're
huge.
Like, you don't even have words for how enormous and vast the Rockies are.
They were... I'll get into in a second.
Yeah.
About just how crazy the mountains were to them. So, as they're traveling through Missouri, they encountered sandstone bluffs, and are like, this is really cool. They described it as an ancient city. And on June 2nd, they encountered a fork in the river.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, shit, where do we go? Which way do we take?
Yeah.
There's two options. So the crew was saying, let's take the Missouri up to this point had been muddy and slow. So we should take the fork that is still muddy and slow, because that's the Missouri River. But Lewis and Clarke were like, no, we're trying to travel west, and west is where those mountains are. So we need to be going towards water that's cold and fast, because that's mountain water. We need to go that way. But Lewis and Clarke were not like tyrants. They were the captains of the expedition, but they were like, we trust our men. They're like our family. So we're going to scout both options.
Okay.
So they each went 40 minutes or 40 miles down the rivers. And Lewis and Clarke were still like, we think it's the fast and clear river. And the men were still like, we still think it's the slow and muddy river. We think that's the Missouri, but we trust you guys. So we're going to go with your decision.
Okay.
Like unanimously, all the men were like, we trust you too.
Wow.
So they went, I think it was the South Fork that they took. The left fork, which I think was to the south. They were like, okay, we just have to make sure we find the waterfall that the Hidatsus and the Mandans had told us about. If we find this waterfall, we know that we went the right way.
Yeah.
Because we're screwed if we don't find this waterfall. So Lewis like goes out on foot to try to find these waterfalls. And he found them. They went the right way.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? So Lewis sent word back to Clarke to bring forward the rest of the expedition. And when they got there, they were like, this isn't just one little waterfall we've got to make our way around. There were waterfall after waterfall after waterfall after waterfall. And they can't just like sail these boats down the waterfalls. They have to pick up the boats and go over land with them. And this is desert that they're in now.
Oh, no.
So these poor men are having to, like, they built, like, some impromptu carts, and they're having to drag all these canoes over prickly pears, wearing moccasins. So they're, like, their feet are getting stabbed every day. The men are so exhausted, they're literally, like, passing out. They had to trek 18 and a half miles in the summer sun while hauling
in the desert,
all of their canoes and supplies in the desert.
Oh my God.
On top of cactus, which was everywhere. There's no avoiding the cactus.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They were literally having to make new shoes every 2 days because they were just getting shredded. So yeah, it was hell. It was hell. Storms were really bad too. They were very sudden and violent. Actually, Clarke, Charbonneau, Sacagawea, and Jean-Baptiste all almost drowned in a flash flood.
Oh my God.
They were okay. And at one point there was hail, and some of the men were almost killed by the hail. It was just, it was so bad. It was so bad. And they only had tents. Like, they didn't have like metal shelters to use. They had tents. And at one point, Sacagawea became super sick.
Oh no.
She, like, no one really knew what to do. Lewis tried bleeding her. That didn't work. He gave her opium. That didn't really work. But then he had her drink from a sulfur spring that they found.
Yeah.
And she got better. So great.
Weird, but all right. We're rolling with it.
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong. I don't know. But sulfur, I think, can be used as an antibiotic.
Okay.
Because I know I have a sulfur allergy, and I think some antibiotics have sulfur in them. So
I didn't know you had a sulfur allergy.
I only bring it up in medical history.
Yeah, that's just, I didn't even think about that being a thing that you could be allergic to.
Me neither. And honestly, I don't even know if I'm still allergic to it, but I was when I was a baby, and I'm like, I don't need to risk it. Yeah. Anyway, so remember when Lewis and Clarke were planning this leg of the journey, and they're like, oh, we'll just be over the waterfalls in a few hours, like half a day. It took them a month to get around these waterfalls.
Oh my God. A month to get around the waterfalls?
A whole ass month to haul their canoes. Because, let me see. I don't know if you can see it. It may be too far away. Yeah, it's too far away. But like a closer up view of the map around this area, the river is just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth around like miles and miles and waterfalls everywhere. So yeah, it took them a month. I've seen between 3 to 5 weeks. So
wow.
But on July 4th, the crew celebrated Independence Day with a fiddle and drink and finished the rest of the whiskey off.
Oh.
The Lewis and Clarke were like, y'all have deserved this. Y'all need a little fun. Yeah.
Nice.
But Lewis and Clarke were super anxious. They were like, this was hell. We still have these fucking mountains to get
that
over.
we haven't even gotten to yet.
No, they still haven't gotten to the mountains.
Oh my god.
They're not even close to the mountains. It's yeah.
I'm so
they're like,
stressed
these
for
are
them.
I know. This is a very stressful journey. Just know, like, spoiler, it turns out okay in the end.
Thank God.
Yeah. So they're like, all right, guys, like, let's keep going. And at this point, like, we've talked about, the crew were like family to them at this point. I mean, they survived hell together. So they're like, yeah, let's keep going. Like, we're getting closer and closer to our goal. Let's keep going. So they eventually were able to get back onto the Missouri River. But now the river's turning south. And they're like, we can't go south. That's the wrong way.
Yeah.
So Clarke, York, and a few other men went overland to try to find the Shoshone tribe, which is the tribe that Sacagawea it belongs to.
Yeah.
Because they're like, if we can find the Shoshone tribe, they can give us horses, and then we can use those horses to get over the mountains. That was their goal. Like, they had to get horses.
Right.
They could not traverse the mountains on foot. And, like, the year's still going by.
Yeah.
Like, it's summer now, but, like,
winter's coming.
it's going to be winter.
Yeah.
Winter's coming, yes. But, like, they can't find the Shoshones, and now they're around what's modern-day Helena, Montana.
Okay.
And the river divided into 3 tributaries, which they named the Gallatin, the Madison, and the Jefferson. Gallatin and Madison were the secretaries of, like, I think Gallatin was, like, Secretary of the Treasury.
Okay.
Madison was Secretary of State, and then Jefferson. And the Jefferson pointed west, so they
went to the
kept
Jefferson.
going west.
Okay.
And as they're going, the water is getting more and more shallow because they're getting more into, like, the source water of the river. And they're having to pull the canoes by hand. And at this point, it's late July and early August. And it is hot.
Yeah.
It is hot, hot, hot. And they're coming up to the mountains, and they can see there's snow on the peaks of the mountains. And they're like, what the fuck is this shit? What the hell? Again, they've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
Because the Appalachian Mountains are not that high.
No, they're too
like,
old.
They're old.
Yeah.
Old. And they're not like the Rockies, like, at all. So they're like, these have to be ridiculous mountains. If it is like 150 degrees down here and dry, no humidity at all, and there's fucking snow on the top of the mountains, like, that's ridiculous. And now at this point, everything is going wrong. Canoes are getting overturned. The tow ropes are snapping. One of the crew was almost killed by a canoe that like the tow line got snapped. Oh. And the water was dividing into smaller and smaller streams that were impossible to traverse using a canoe. They're basically, I think, walking through a marshland at this point. Because, again, they're getting closer to the source water of the river.
Yeah.
And they had no load-bearing animals. No horses, no donkeys, not a cow to be seen. It was just them.
Not a single ass.
Not a single ass. They were having to pull it by hand. And again, they're like, we have to find the Shoshones.
Yeah.
But they're starting to get really frustrated. They're starting to lose hope. But Sacagawea was like, I recognize that mountain right there. We used to call that Beaver Head. I know that mountain. So they're like, oh my God, okay. Oh, she started to recognize landmarks. Okay, we have to be getting close to the Shoshones. And it invigorated them. We're like, let's keep going. So this time, Lewis set out on foot again to try to find the Shoshone tribe. And 3 days after setting out, he saw a Native American on horseback. And he was like, oh my God, I found a Shoshone scout. So he lays down his gun and he's yelling what he thought was friend in the Shoshone language.
Oh no.
But when he had asked Sacagawea what to say, she misunderstood what he meant. Because again, they're having to translate multiple different languages, and she doesn't speak English. And they don't have a friend for white man in their language because by all accounts, they had never encountered white people before, to develop a word for that. And so what he thought was friend was actually stranger. So he's like waving his arms, yelling stranger at this guy who's seeing a white man for probably the first time in his life. And the guy's like, no, thank you. And he turns around and rides off on his horse.
Yeah, he's like, yes, you are strange.
Yeah. And Lewis, like, literally is like, no.
Come back.
Like, falls into despair. Like, he is like, no. So on August 12th, the group is traveling. Oh, on August 12th, the group that had traveled from Fort Mandan makes its way to DC.
Okay.
Arrives in DC.
Yeah.
And on that same day, the Corps of Discovery is making their way on an, quote, Indian trail that would hopefully lead them to a Shoshone village.
Right.
They're like, okay, we think this is a trail that's used for, like, navigating this land. Hopefully this will lead us to a village. And they end up finding a fountain that's the source of the Missouri River, which I think was pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah. And they are starting to get closer to the Continental Divide. And the thing about the Continental Divide is that rivers flowing on the, like, the right side, if you're facing it, I guess, of the Continental Divide flow east towards the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
Water on the other side of the Continental Divide flows west towards the Pacific Ocean. That's how you know it's a Continental Divide. So they're going up this hill, and Lewis is like, by George, we've done it. We found the Continental Divide. We're here. We're almost to the Pacific Ocean. We're gonna get there soon.
Oh no.
And he walks up this hill, and he sees more mountains. And he's like, motherfucker. No sign of the Columbia River. No sign of anything that can use to just, like, make their way.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And he's like, he's finally coming to the conclusion. He's like, there's no Northwest Passage. There's no waterway that takes you from the Mississippi to the Pacific Ocean. There's just not.
100% is not.
There is not. We wouldn't have had to build a Panama Canal if there was one. So now the crew's like, okay, we really have to find horses now because we still have to get through all these fucking mountains.
Yeah.
So Lewis and Clarke separated. Clarke went ahead with most of the men to start moving towards the west. So Clarke is like, we'll just go ahead and start moving. We'll see where we get. Okay, we're just going to keep going on. And Lewis is going to take a few men with him and try to find the Shoshones yet again. And they finally encounter 3 Shoshone women who are, like, gathering herbs and stuff. And they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they're, like, giving them gifts and paint. And they're like, please don't run away from us.
Yeah, please don't. Just stay here. Just stay here, please.
Just stay here. And suddenly, like, 60 warriors come up out of nowhere, led by Chief Kamehameha, and that means the one who never walks.
Okay.
Which I thought is, like, super metal.
Yeah. Does he always run? Does he ride?
Or he's always on his horse.
Nice. I like it.
And again, like, the Shoshone had never encountered a white person before. So they're like, what is this? But, you know, they were like, hey, we're cool. They treated them with friendliness and warmth, accepted them into their village. And Lewis, like, they use sign language a lot. Lewis was able to convey that they needed horses. But Kamehameha was like, I think they're trying to spring a trap on us because they've conveyed that there's this small party here and there's a bigger party somewhere else. And I don't know what's up with those guys. So he was like, hold that thought. I want to see your main party. I want to make sure this isn't a trap. And so they traveled together to go to Clarke's party that were still trying to make their way west. Clarke and the rest of his crew are making their way up. And they finally find each other on August 17th. And Lewis and Clarke begin their negotiations for horses. So Kagawea is asked to interpret for them. And when she saw Kamehameha, she realized that he was her brother.
She'd been gone for like 5 or 6 years at that point, right?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And now he's chief of the tribe, and like the documentary described like she like fell apart and was like crying and hugging and kissing him, and it was just a very, very happy family reunion.
Oh.
I know.
I love
it was
that.
very sweet. But like happy family reunion, now it's down to business. And the way that the translation worked, because again, like it's a mess. So Sacagawea translated from Shoshone to Hidatsa.
Mm-hmm.
Charbonneau would translate from Hidatsa to French. And Labiche would translate from French to English.
Wow, that's a fucked up game of telephone right there.
It really is. But they were able to get shit done, and they were able to negotiate and trade for horses.
Okay.
And the Shoshone would provide a guide to get them over the mountains.
Okay.
Which, in this area, it's the Bitterroot Mountains. The next day was Lewis's 31st birthday, apparently, on August 18th. And, like, he wrote in his journal, he was like, I don't think I've done enough. Like, the most imposter syndrome.
I don't think I've done enough. You're in the
Bless
wilderness, exploring new lands at
negotiating
31.
with tribes and...
Sir.
I know.
Oh, the fuck.
Bless his heart.
I know.
So, they were presented with a choice.
Okay.
Lewis and Clarke were, about how to move forward and westward. So they could either go south into the plains, but there would be very little food or water. Or they could go north into the mountains, and the guide said that he could get them to a river within 10 days.
Okay.
And they were like, this has to be the Columbia River. So they're like, let's go the 10-day route with more food and water. Please, yes, thanks. So on August 31st, the expedition continued its journey. They had 29 horses, 1 mule, and an elderly guide they called Old Toby.
Old Toby?
Old Toby!
He seems like the cutest guy ever.
I know. He was like an elderly Shoshone man that was like, all right, let's go up the mountains.
Hello,
now.
I'm Old Toby.
I'm Old Toby. So they learned that as they continued through the mountains, you're going to... Okay, so I'm going to pull up this map.
Okay.
Okay. So I want you to see... And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So you see as they're getting the red line, as they're getting into Oregon country on the map.
Yes.
You see how like they're going and there's like this big U shape.
Yeah.
So this is the detour that they took to get around all those waterfalls.
What?
Yeah. But you see where it kind of like goes back up?
Yeah.
This little mound. Apparently this little mound where the Shoshones were, it was a 4-day walk to the Great Falls. They took a month-long detour around the falls when the Shoshone tribe was 4 days away from the Great Falls. If they had just gone like a different way.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They were not happy to learn about that.
Yeah.
They were a little pissed off. Which, I mean, like, they didn't know.
How would they
didn't
know?
have a map. They had no idea what they were doing. And honestly, like, the fact that they made it as far as they did is super hella impressive. So, but yeah, they were not very happy.
Shit.
But now they knew, like, on their way back, they knew, like, okay, we can get to the Great Falls in 4 days instead of a month this time. So now it's starting to become September. And September is bringing in colder weather as expeditions crossing the Blackfoot Mountains. And they're already starting to run low on food. And they actually had to kill a colt for food.
Oh.
Because the hunting was just not sufficient enough to feed over 30 people at this point. So do you remember how the Shoshone said it would take like 10 days to cross the mountains?
Oh no.
Poor little Toby got lost.
Not Toby.
Like, they all got lost.
Not old Toby.
He lost track of the trail, and they ended up spending 2 days wandering the mountainsides.
Oh my God.
Because they had no idea where they were going. And some areas were so steep, the horses fell backwards. They were fine. Like, they didn't die.
That's gotta be steep.
It's steep as shit. And it started snowing.
No, of course it started snowing.
Which made it even harder to keep track of the trail.
Oh, no.
They were cold. They were hungry. They literally had to resort to eating candles at some points.
Ew.
Because they had no food. And, like, but I also want to consider, like, these are men that have consistently had food every day, all day for their entire lives.
Yeah.
Like, they could not go, like, a couple days without food.
Neither could I.
Like, Chicago, me neither. But the documentary pointed out, like, Chicago, she was like, y'all are babies.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm literally keeping an infant alive and I don't have enough food. It's fine.
You're fine.
Like, it'll be okay. So they actually did make it through in 11 days.
Okay.
Which is pretty close to the proposed outcome. Yeah, they traveled 165 miles through the mountains in 11 days.
In the snow.
Yeah.
What?
Crazy. So my next section is called Straight Sailing from Here.
Okay.
They cross the mountains and they see the Clearwater River.
Yeah.
And the Nez Perce tribe. Or the Nez Perce refer to themselves as Nimipu, which is their language for the people. So I'm actually going to refer to them as the Nimipu tribe because that's the name they gave themselves.
Okay.
But the documentary called them Nez Perce. And this is at the Idaho and Montana border-ish. Okay. So the expedition, they were the first white people the Nimipu had ever encountered. And one of the chiefs, Twisted Hair, decided they were like, him and his council of elders, like, okay, what do we do with these white strangers?
Yeah.
And they're like, let's kill them all and steal all their stuff. And there was a woman named Watkuis who had actually been stolen from her tribe. So lived as a slave and was sold to white men. She did manage to return home, and I think Watkuis means the one who returns.
Oh, okay.
But she was like, hey, when I was like with white people, they treated me super nice and kind, so maybe don't kill them all. And they're like, okay.
That's all it took?
Like and then the expedition came in and they're like, welcome to our village and here's food and like you'll be safe here.
Wow.
Yeah. Go Watkuis. And the diet of the Nimipu tribe were like salmon and camas roots. Lots of roots. And this diet was not good for the men. It just didn't, they had been eating like red meat their entire lives. Now they're eating fish and roots.
Yeah.
And it made them all very sick.
Yeah.
It was very, very sick. Clarke wrote that he and Lewis ate a root soup that, quote, filled us so full of wind that we were scarcely able to breathe all night. So I assume that means they had really, really bad gas. But they were also bloated as fuck.
They had to fart so bad. They couldn't breathe.
They have never had so much fiber in their lives.
They're out of the laxatives, the thunderclap or whatever they called it.
The thunderbolt.
Thunderbolt.
But it was really bad. Like the men, like they like gorged themselves on the roots and stuff because they hadn't had good food in days, and they got violently ill. They were puking. They had diarrhea. Some came down with dysentery. Like it was really bad. And they begged the captains to kill one of the horses to eat, which they did agree to.
Okay. Well.
And that like settled their fiberless tummies.
They settled their tum-tums. I hate that they had to do that. But like the Shackleton episode, I understand the need for survival.
Yes, I do too. So the expedition stayed with the Nimipu tribe for about 2 weeks, building up their strength from the 10 days in the mountains. the Nimipu said they could take the Clearwater River all the way to the ocean, which I think they took the Clearwater River to the Columbia River.
Okay.
But they had to make new canoes because they didn't take the canoes with them over the mountains.
No, there'd be no way.
There's no way. They never would have made it. So Nimipu and Twisted Hair actually taught them a new method of making canoes by like burning out the inside instead of like chiseling it.
Yeah.
Very smart. So they're off in their new canoes and they're with the river's current for the first time since they left St. Louis.
Bless them.
I know. So, I see. They went on the Clearwater River and then the Snake River.
Okay.
And I think from there, they were able to get to the Columbia River on October 16th, which is right on the border of eastern Oregon and Washington.
Okay.
And they were making great time. Now they're with the current, they're flying through. But it's unfortunate because at this time, like, they're traveling through and it's still kind of a desert climate. Like, there's little game for hunting. There's little food, like wood for fires. So they were buying food from tribes as they made their journey down the Columbia. And this is really sad. This is a little trigger warning.
Okay. For
food choices. So the documentary makes the point that the Columbia River was lousy with salmon. There were piles of salmon everywhere. Okay. So they had plenty of food to eat, but they didn't want salmon. They wanted red meat. So they bought dogs from the tribes to eat instead, which is really sad. I literally put a frowny face in my notes.
I hate that.
I do too. Like, they literally had so much free salmon they could eat, but they're like, we don't want fish. We want meat, I guess.
Ugh.
Yeah. So finally, the expedition made it to Mount Hood, which had been named 8 years earlier by a ship that had sailed in from the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
So the men were like, we're getting closer to the Pacific Ocean. They were frantic at this point. They're like, we gotta get there. We're almost done. And they're getting back to mapped territory.
Yes. Because
the western coast had been mapped by traders and all that stuff. It was just in between.
Right.
No one had ever gone through. So, and like, they're going through rapids and cascades. And the documentary said that native peoples would like gather around like bends and stuff along the river to like wait for the canoes to capsize, and they'd like collect all the stuff. Not a single canoe overturned at all. They were like, I'm just imagining the deadly focus of them like keeping their canoes upright as they traveled through like whitewater rapids.
Good for them. Oh,
yeah.
That's impressive.
I agree. And at this point, they're 200 miles from the ocean. They're so close.
Oh, they're so close.
And there was a period where they were talking about going through the Columbia River Gorge. And there's this transition between the desert climate and rainforest.
Yeah.
Because the Pacific Northwest is rainforest. Like, it's a legitimate one.
Yeah.
And so it's like one side of the river is desert. And then they're going into just constant rain. So.
That's weird.
And they're going and going and going. And they're noticing, like, the native tribes had houses made of wood. Clothing made of wood. And they had American and European goods. Like, they had hats and stuff like that. So, like, okay, there's trade here. Like, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. And on November 7th, 1805, they set out on an incredibly foggy morning. So foggy, they could barely see in front of them. But they're like, okay, there's tidal waters. Like, we're starting to notice tidal waters. We're starting to smell the salt. The water's getting salty. We're getting close. And as they continued, the fog lifted and the Corps of Discovery finally laid their eyes on the Pacific Ocean.
Success!
No, it wasn't. They thought it was the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't.
No.
They were in a bay. A bay 25 miles out from the ocean.
No, damn.
They were so close. And suddenly a gigantic storm hit.
No!
And they were stuck in this one spot for like a week.
Oh my God.
Literally, it was so wet and the storm was so bad, their clothes were falling off of them, like rotting away. Their shelters were basically gone. Like they were having to hide under rocks. Like it was so miserable.
Oh my God.
And it's November. But they managed to survive and they managed to keep going. And on November 18th, 1805, Clarke traveled to the top of a big hill. And there he saw, legitimately, the Pacific
Finally!
Ocean. They finally made it. Yes. And that's where we're going to stop for part 1. Surprise, it's a two-parter.
The suspense.
What's going to happen now that they've reached the Pacific Ocean?
Oh, time to turn around, I guess.
Yep. Well, not quite, but essentially after a little while, yes. Right. So, we're going to stop there for part 1, and we'll see you next week for part 2, where you get to learn about all the shenanigans that happens after.
I'm so excited.
Yes.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Yay.
So, thanks for listening, and, socials.
Oh, yeah, we have those.
The brain motion is real.
Gmail.
illequippedhistory@gmail.com. No spaces or dashes.
Facebook.
Ill-Equipped History. No. Podcast group and page. Oh my God. That was... Y'all, the brain mush is so real right now.
Okay. Instagram.
@illequippedhistory. I got that one.
TikTok.
@illequippedhistory.
And Patreon.
Patreon.com/illequippedhistory, where for $5 a month you get our bonus episodes.
You know, you would think that I would actually write this down and go in some form of order, but
no.
I don't.
No.
I don't.
No, and I never want you to.
Okay, good. I never will then.
We will just continue to freak out about it every week. Like, what? What are our social media things?
What's a book face? I don't know.
Talk. Is this Vine?
I called it a tiki talk earlier today, and Lou was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" She said, "How old are you?"
Tiki talk.
Yeah.
Where we share memes.
Fucking memes. I swear in high school, I got in an argument with someone once. They're like, it's spelled Mimi. And I'm like, there's a ton of things that are spelled the way they're not pronounced. Mm-hmm. Come on.
It's meme.
Meme.
Yeah, that was a really deep cut joke. I'm proud of that one.
I'm very proud of you too. Very proud of you too.
Well,
So I'm trying to think of a send off. If you're traveling in uncharted land, maybe don't drink all the whiskey at one time.
Yeah. Make sure.
Or drink it all at one time so then you don't have to carry it.
There you go. That's an option.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to have gifts for people. You never know who you're going to run into. Mm-hmm. And then you have a gift to give. And you can make friends and be best buddies. And I'll help you.
Yeah.
God, they got so much help from native tribes, on their way.
They really did.
They would not.
They couldn't have made it that far.
Oh, no. Not at all. They would be, somewhere in the tundra in Canada if they didn't have native tribes telling them where to go.
Yeah.
They couldn't even make it over the Rockies, No,
they would have died in the Rockies. Yeah. For sure. If they had made it that far, it would have been over in the Rockies.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
So, way to go, native peoples that know the land and know what they're doing.
Yeah. You literally saved Lewis and Clarke and all those other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next week. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.